Casemiro has won 5 Champions Leagues. He has won the World Cup. He has started for Real Madrid, Manchester United, and Brazil for over a decade. On June 13th, 2026, an 18-year-old studying mathematics at university made him look completely lost. Not occasionally, not in one moment. For 45 minutes, until Brazil's coaching staff decided they had seen enough and took him off at half-time. The kid's name is Ayyoub Bouaddi. He plays for Lille in France, and he is 18 years old. Before I get into the numbers, and the numbers here are genuinely jaw-dropping, let me give you some context that makes this even more remarkable. Morocco versus Brazil, Group C, MetLife Stadium, New Jersey. Brazil arrived at this tournament managed by Carlo Ancelotti, one of the most decorated coaches in football history. Their midfield included Casemiro, Bruno Guimaraes, and Lucas Paquetá, 3 players with combined Champions League and Premier League experience stretching back years. Morocco named an 18-year-old, making his competitive international debut as a starter against them. Think about that for a second. Not a cameo off the bench, not 20 minutes at the end. A starter, from minute 1, against Brazil. And this wasn't desperation selection. Morocco's head coach Mohamed Ouabi looked at his options, looked at Brazil's squad, and decided, Bouaddi starts. That decision changed the game completely. By the time the final whistle went on a 1-1 draw, a teenager from Lille had become the most talked-about player of the entire opening round of the 2026 World Cup. Here's why the numbers suggest this wasn't a fluke. Bouaddi didn't just have a good game against Brazil, he was statistically the best midfielder on the pitch. Here are the numbers from that 90 minutes. 87 touches, more than any other Moroccan player on the pitch, including captain Achraf Hakimi. 91% passing accuracy, 60 passes completed out of 66 attempted. And here is the number that stops the conversation completely. 100% completion rate in the final third. Every single one of his 16 passes in Brazil's half found its target. Not 80%, not 90, 100. Against Casemiro, against Bruno Guimaraes, against Lucas Paquetá, 6 ball recoveries, 5 interceptions, 9 duels won. Here is what those numbers actually mean tactically. The defensive midfielder role, the position Bouaddi plays, is built on 2 things. First, you protect the backline by cutting off the passes that break through the midfield block. Second, you recycle possession quickly and cleanly to keep your team's shape. Bouaddi did both, simultaneously, at 18, against Brazil. His heat map showed him covering the width of the pitch constantly, not sitting in one zone, but reading where the danger was before it arrived. 6 recoveries and 5 interceptions in 90 minutes at a World Cup in your first international start is not a good number. That is an elite number. Now, the fair pushback here is that Brazil, despite their squad quality, were not at their sharpest in this match. The heat, the occasion, the new tactical setup under Ancelotti, none of it clicked for the Seleção in the way it usually does, and that is a valid point. Brazil limited to 5 shots on target is below their standard. Casemiro was not helped by the structure around him. But here is why that counter doesn't hold. Nobody told Bouaddi that Brazil was slightly off. He still had to win those 9 duels. He still had to make those interceptions. The game was not gift-wrapped for him. He took it. Bouaddi was not just the best 18-year-old on that pitch. Based on the data, he was the best midfielder on that pitch. Full stop. That's the performance in isolation, but here's where it gets genuinely complicated, because what Bouaddi did wasn't just impressive for his age, it put him into the history books. Bouaddi's passing performance against Brazil was one of the best by any teenager in 60 years of World Cup history. 60 completed passes in a single World Cup match. At 18 years and 254 days old, Bouaddi became the second youngest player in the last 60 years to complete at least 50 passes in a single World Cup game. The only younger player to do this? Gavi, for Spain, at the 2022 World Cup, at 18 years and 110 days. That is the company we are talking about. Gavi, who went on to win the Ballon d'Or. Gavi, who is considered one of the best midfielders of his generation. Bouaddi is now in that conversation. Here is what makes this number historically significant. It is not just the volume of passes. It is what completing 60 passes means in a World Cup game at that position. Defensive midfielders are not typically the players racking up high pass tallies. Their job is to protect, to intercept, to recycle. High-volume passing from that position means your team trusted you with the ball under pressure, repeatedly, across the full 90 minutes. Brazil were pressing. Brazil have Casemiro, a player whose entire career has been built on stopping exactly what Bouaddi was doing. And Bouaddi completed 60 passes anyway. That is not youthful energy carrying him through. That is football intelligence that most senior internationals never develop. The argument some will make is that pass completion stats can be inflated by safe sideways passing, that a high completion rate doesn't always mean high risk, high reward distribution. Fair, let's check. 100% in the final third. All 16 of his passes in Brazil's half found their target. Those are not sideways passes to your centre-back. Those are passes played forward, under pressure, into tight spaces, against one of the best defensive midfields on the planet. In 60 years of World Cup football, only one teenager has passed the ball better in a single match than Bouaddi did against Brazil. Now, everything I just said about the statistics, that only scratches the surface, because there is a third layer to this story that most analysts are completely missing. And this one is about what Bouaddi's performance means for the future of African football. Bouaddi's debut is not just a great individual performance, it is evidence that African football has entered a new era, and the rest of the world is not ready for it. Consider what Morocco has done in the last 4 years. 2022 World Cup, first African nation to reach the semi-finals in the tournament's history. 2026 World Cup opener, hold Brazil, 5-time world champions, managed by Ancelotti, to a draw, with an 18-year-old running their midfield. And Bouaddi is not alone. Ismail Saibari scored the opening goal that night, a precise, composed finish from a perfectly weighted through ball. The Atlas Lions limited Brazil to 5 shots on target across 90 minutes. This was not a lucky draw. This was a tactical performance built on a clear system, elite pressing, and a midfield that refused to be dominated. Here is what Morocco are doing differently to most African nations at this tournament. They are developing technically elite midfielders through European academies, Bouaddi through Lille's system, and integrating them into a cohesive national team structure that has been building for years under consistent coaching. From a boy who sat in the stands in Russia in 2018 watching Morocco at the World Cup to the best midfielder on the pitch 8 years later against Brazil, Bouaddi's journey is the kind of story football was made for. And here is the thing most people will miss when they debate whether Bouaddi can sustain this level. The question isn't whether he is ready for this stage. The question is whether this stage is ready for him. The counter-argument here is that one performance, however brilliant, does not define a player's trajectory. Many teenagers have had stunning World Cup moments and failed to reach the heights that debut promised. That is a fair historical point. But here is what separates Bouaddi from those cases. He did not produce one highlight moment. He produced 90 minutes of consistent, intelligent, disciplined football against the best opposition he has ever faced. Highlights are luck. 90 minutes of elite stats are character. Morocco have not just found a midfielder. In my opinion, based on what the numbers showed against Brazil, they have found the player who will define African football for the next decade. So, 3 points. 3 layers of evidence. Now let's bring it all together and give you the honest verdict. Here is my honest read on Ayyoub Bouaddi after one World Cup match. The numbers do not lie. 87 touches, 91% passing accuracy, 100% in the final third, 5 interceptions, 9 duels won, second best teenager by pass volume in 60 years of World Cup football against Brazil in his first competitive international start at 18 years old. There is a version of this story where people say, wait for more games, wait for the knockout rounds, wait for the pressure to build before you anoint anyone. And in my opinion, that caution is justified. One match is one match. But here is what I keep coming back to. Casemiro, a man who has been one of the best defensive midfielders on the planet for a decade, was taken off at half-time. He had picked up a yellow card in the 36th minute, and Ancelotti could not risk a second. But the reason he was in that position, chasing passes, arriving late, picking up a booking just to stop a counter-attack, was sitting right across the midfield from him. Bouaddi had made him look slow, made him look heavy, made him look like a player from a different era of the game. That does not happen by accident. The most remarkable thing about Bouaddi's performance was not the stats. It was the moment in the 87th minute, with Morocco drawing 1-1, with the clock running, with pressure on every touch, when he received the ball, stopped to applaud a teammate's pass, and then turned and glided forward like none of the pressure existed. That is not 18-year-old energy. That is a footballer who already knows exactly who he is. In my opinion, Bouaddi is not a prospect anymore. He arrived at this World Cup, and the game will not look the same once he is done with it. I want to know what you think. Is Bouaddi the real deal? Or is one brilliant performance against a below-par Brazil not enough to call it? And here is the question I genuinely cannot answer yet. If Morocco reach the knockout rounds and Bouaddi keeps performing at this level, does he become the player of this tournament? Drop your answer below. I want to read every single one.